Okay, Skylar, who the hell do we think we are?
I don't know anymore, Alex.
I really wish we had cameras because I wish I had on video what this looks like, what we're doing here right now. Skylar is lying on a couch. I told him we had to record an intro for this, and I have like a little stand like this. It's on a table or on the ground or whatever, but it's small, and Skylar has it on his chest, lying on the couch, sprawled out, as if he just wants to go to sleep forever.
Yeah, well, this is actually
we're just talking about how our bodies are meat prisons too, so I guess that's the mood right now.
This is the most comfortable mic setup I've ever had in my life. Typically, I have to like stand up and hold a guitar and like play it.
This is the only way you're ever going to record again, huh?
Yeah. I mean, man.
So, who the hell are we, Skylar?
We're best friends.
We are best friends. We've, I guess Skylar wants to call this a podcast. I just wanted to record fun conversations and then post them online and see if other people think they're fun too.
We don't have to call it a podcast.
So, well, yeah, I mean, I would prefer that we don't, but we are best friends, and we are going to be reviewing all kinds of different things. I think this will be a really fun thing to do. We are first going to be talking about UFOs, and we recorded some audio a while back of Skylar telling some stories from his personal life about encounters that he has had with them, and this introduction is me attempting to introduce that.
That's what's up next.
It really does feel like our bodies are meat prisons, though, huh?
Definitely.
Yeah. Seems really disgusting. You know, when I was like 18 years old, and I was in my first semester of college, I was going through a really bad depression episode, and in all of my English essays, I was not able to really do the assignment as written, but I was, like, I would call, like, people meatbags and things, like, the cringiest edgelord shit you can possibly imagine, but the English teacher was really nice. I think she was also, like, a grad student, so she was just like, I don't want to, I just can't do it. I just can't. 80%. That's what I'll give him for this.
Really? You had that experience too? Because that was my experience with my first English course.
Calling people meatbags?
Well, I think I got a 70% in that class.
I was just making I did it again. I said,
You were making it up?
Well, no, not the story. I was making up the number. I don't have the actual number.
Oh.
I probably did much worse than 80%, frankly, my first semester of college.
My English teacher did not like me. I sent her an email because she assigned me a 20-page research paper about Ray Kroc and the McDonald's franchise, and I was like, I don't want to write about this. So I wrote a half-ass rough draft of this thing, and then sent her an email that I had copied and pasted several hundred stanzas of Malkovich over and over again. That was when our relationship as
went south.
Teacher and pupil started to disintegrate.
My second English teacher, my English 2 or 201, I can't remember the name of the class. Anyway, the second English credit requirement I had, the teacher did not like me, and for pretty good reasons. I think she had some great
bad
points.
At English. No, I'm kidding.
I was bad at fulfilling the requirements of the class, so kind of,
Yeah.
All right, we've been stalling long enough. I hope you enjoy the stories that Skylar is about to be telling you from the past. We're not as we're still not what you might call professional, but I think that it's really developed since then. I hope you stick around and listen to more after this. I think we're going to be doing the stuff we record some stuff of us talking about Roswell, so I think that's what we'll be doing. Or did we do a thing before Roswell? Actually, we did Battle of Los Angeles, so we're going to do that and then Roswell probably. And
Kenneth Arnold. I'm gonna talk about
oh yeah, oh my god, I don't remember anything.
We've got a backlog.
Yeah. So anyway, please enjoy, and Skylar, I hope you enjoy staying right where you're at, buddy.
I tend to pick and choose who I talk about this stuff with. Not just UFOs in general. I mean, that's fun to talk with anyone about, but like the personal experiences, I don't even want to call them experiences, like, because they weren't that profound in the end, but like,
You experience something that you can't explain, and UFO, like, it answers all of the questions more neatly than anything else can. Is that like a fair way to describe?
basically, yeah, UFO would answer the questions neatly.
It was literally something unidentified flying and an object.
Yeah, and yeah, I guess it's just to say that I know how it sounds.
Skylar is really, really worried about sounding like a sick person, you know, and he's not. He is very well aware of, you know, all of this stuff. So
my relationship with you,
let's yeah. So I mean, before getting, like, how do you feel about it when, like, UFOs or UFO experiences or UFO stories outside of your own, like when you hear somebody else who has had one, do you think your experiences like allow you to empathize with them in a special or particular way, or do you feel like you can still see it from the point of view of a complete skeptic?
I think it does allow me to empathize in some ways, but I'm skeptical, and not just of UFO stuff, but generally I try to be that way in my life. You know,
that is true. You are one of the most like logical thinking people I know. You have an appreciation for logic and science and all of that, and that's, you know, those are really respectable qualities to have. But one thing, like, you do say to me a lot is, I want to believe the X-Files thing, you know, which I sympathize with. I want to believe as well. So what kind of things, when somebody tells you a UFO story or has had a UFO experience, what kind of things do you start? Because we all like have this sort of automatic process, right? Like, the first thing we want to know is this true or not? Or can we like trust that the people are telling us something they believe is true? Like, we sort of go through this bullshit detection process, right? What kind of things do you look for as either red flags that they're bullshitting you, or even signs that they're telling the truth? What are your kind of...
Well, I mean, that comes down to whoever it is that might be talking to me, and there aren't a lot of people that talk to me about this, but I do have some people that are close to me that have seen things and had, you know, an experience.
Well, what if it's not personal though? Even just like stories like that you read, like we're all aware of like the Betty and Barney Hill story or the Roswell crash, or, you know, these kinds of stories. What do you look for in a story, a UFO story, as far as, you know, is this true or is this not true, or do they at least believe that it's true?
So that's kind of a twofold answer, because if, you know, I think that most people that talk about it like believe that they saw something, you know, that something happened. So I guess
they're sincere. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I look for sincerity. As far as like the a anecdotal account.
I guess that makes sense. You have to establish that these people at least believe that they are telling the truth about what happened, even if you might quibble about what happened.
And then secondarily, I'd say I would look, as tenuous as this is, for corroborating evidence,
Yeah, if you find out, like in the Betty Barney Hill thing, for example, they, had the experience that they had, and then they found out later that the Air Force Base, I think, nearby had shown an object on radar that they, weren't aware of what it was. That kind of thing. Is that what you're referring to?
That kind of
more
thing,
than one source.
That kind of thing, yeah, and then more than one source, and that's an even more hard defined kind of.
Yeah, well,
thing,
it could be something a little simpler too, like the Phoenix lights. How there are multiple video angles. Several people got that on video. So
yeah, and thousands of people,
and thousands of people saw it. So we know that those lights were up there caused by something, and we don't know what.
So, and this is something else that I look for. I would say, if somebody's relaying a story to me, is it something that seems reasonable to me based on the things that I've seen? Because I think there is a common thread in the stories, whether they're true or not. But that's
there are a lot of really fascinating common threads that I think we're going to get to as we go through this series.
That's what I would look for. And I want to say that, like, the vast majority, I mean, I could probably count on one hand, and I'm not a UFO researcher. I haven't talked to hundreds of people about this, but
I don't think that's an actual job. I think that if you're talking about it and reading about it, you're a UFO researcher. I guess there are people that do it professionally, so maybe, you know what, I should be kinder to them, because they're doing all the work that I'm now reaping by talking about it.
That's also, like, doing that professionally is
seems exhausting.
Very closely related, I think, to like being like a professional palm reader in the majority of the cases of people who were doing UFO research. But
there are some people who are doing research that are probably just I mean, it's like any profession, there are probably people that are
maybe
just
a ghost
grifters.
hunter would have been a better.
Well, I don't know, though, because in UFO research, it's like, I guess it depends on how they're doing it. But
right.
In a lot of cases, they are. I mean, I want to be charitable. And to be charitable, I can recognize that there are people who are doing this who, just like you and I, are curious and just want to know what's going on. My personal take on it is that the stuff is more interesting because I think it says more about us, people than it. I do think that these people are all having some kind of experience, maybe not literally every one of them, but in all the major incidents, what makes them so compelling is that they do have these, markers for truth, but it's so wishy-washy what that truth actually is. And they do seem to be profound, and they do affect the people that have them. But the tricky thing is, it's like one of those things that we just don't quite have all of the necessary vocabulary to even talk about. So when I think about a lot of these experiences, the only things that I can compare them to are things like psychedelic drugs or just anything that kind of bends your mind. There's that thing with, if you read accounts of UFO phenomena before even modern times, they always match with the technology of the time. And that makes sense because, if it is an actual event happening to them, the technology of their time is all they have to compare it to. If it's coming from, like an experience that's happening inside of a person that they are projecting onto the reality around them, then that also makes sense. There's no way to know if it's one or the other, or at least there's no way to know right now.
Right.
But let's see. I swear I was going somewhere with this. Anyway, all of that stuff is interesting, whether or not the incident as it occurred actually happened to them. And I guess, okay, so that was my point. So when they describe those phenomena, it's either reflective of the thing that happened and they're just reaching for a way to describe it, or like I said, it could be the reverse. But either way, like our language sort of confines us on this, because whatever, if they are aliens visiting us, whatever technology they have and whatever is actually happening is probably much more complicated or mind-blowing than even we could comprehend and explain to another person right now. And if it's the reverse, then it's your brain that is doing a bunch of crazy nonsense that you don't understand and have no way to control. And, you know, it could be happening to multiple people at once. And it's this thing that we, again, run into where we just don't have the language to describe it or diagnose it. And either way, something is going on, and it's very bizarre and it's fascinating, whatever it is. So, yeah. Do you have more to say about that subject?
Yeah, so there are elements of what you just described, I think, in all of the sort of pop culture UFO encounters that are well documented.
Oh, I'm so sorry to cut in, but I'm glad you mentioned that, because the other thing is, because of the issues with the language and because of the sort of pop cultureification of the subject, it now takes on, there's another like narrative level that is now being imposed on it, because now when you want to tell a compelling story to an audience about an encounter, you have to put it inside of more story constraints. So these layers where the event itself is like one narrative, and then it goes through a medium like a person, and that's a second narrative that gets developed. And then the sharing and dissemination of it is like a third narrative layer. And it gets so, these are all levels that take us away from what is true and real, you know? Anyway.
So I want to finish my thought, and then I have something to say on that. That the major events, the UFO events or incidents, they all have that in common. The ones that interest me, though, are the ones that have witnesses that don't really seem to be interested at all in the lore of it, or you know, like the pop culture of it, or whatever.
They just want to be left alone.
But yeah, on the note about the like narrative and how that kind of takes on a life of its own. I was going to ask you, are there other sort of like other kinds of like events like this that have that quality to them? Because I was trying to think of like that specific quality, you know what I mean? Because that might be an interesting thing to look at.
I think general paranormal or supernatural kind of anything that's like hyper real, like something that it just feels outside of, you know, the reality that you understand or are aware of. I mean, even something as simple as like a Bigfoot sighting or weird, like Skinwalker Ranch is like famous for having multiple kinds of these phenomena.
But even those don't seem to have the same like powerful narrative as the UFO and
this
extraterrestrial.
Absolutely, and that is exactly why we're talking about UFOs, because they're the ones where, like, the playground for this sort of myth making and this these experiences and these encounters is almost infinite, you know?
So what is that? What you think makes it a powerful myth? Because like the Bigfoot thing,
interesting.
that's cool.
Yeah,
You know,
so
but-
Bigfoot is Bigfoot, Loch Ness, and UFOs are some of the most interesting ones because they're things that could conceivably be real. Like, insofar as the laws of science as we know them, though the existence of those things is not 100% prohibited. And that's why they're so fascinating. But UFOs are just inherently more interesting because what, you want to see some dumb animal in a lake or the woods? No, fuck that shit. The aliens from, wherever in the galaxy or maybe even intergalactic, although that seems much less likely. I mean, the idea of that actually happening, or again, the alternative, the idea that there's some kind of glitch inside of a human brain that can like intermingle with multiple human brains and project like this weird ass psychedelic experience.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is that I think that the reason that the UFO narrative across the world, like across the globe, has the power it does is because I think it is touching on something that's even more like embedded in our psyche than something like, we discover a cryptid or not a cryptid, but like a new species that we thought had gone extinct or something like that. You know what I mean?
I guess it's like we've always worshipped gods, and these are like techno gods. It might fulfill that same impulse of, like being interested in, gods. I'm just repeating myself. Yeah. So you might be right about that. I will be interested to find out more. I'm not sure how I feel about all of it or what all of it is appealing about these things to everyone, but we'll get to the bottom of it. And we get our researchers back, then sky's the limit, really. So
who knows? They might be coordinating with the aliens right now.
I don't think that's true.
I mean, that's why I suggested we do it and do the...
I heard a bunch of interns, and they're all family members of the original researchers. And I've hired them for considerably less. You tell them. You tell them that I have them. So yeah, was there more that you wanted to talk about before we get to your stories? I don't really think I have anything else.
I don't think so either.
Okay. How many stories do you have? I think there's more than one, right? There's one that happened to you I know of, and then somebody that's close to you.
Yeah. So I'm going to go way back. And
Sure.
I can't say, I can't really count them right now. I want to say that
That's awesome. I just want one.
Are definitively like 3 or 4 that I know that really stand out as like, I witnessed this with my own eyes and not just sort of like a kind of like a high strangeness experience. But I do want to go back to when I was a kid, because
Thank you for reminding me of the term high strangeness, by the way. I really appreciate it. That's what I was looking for when I was describing them as psychedelic. Yeah. Anyway, thank you.
yeah. So I want to go back to when I was a kid, and I have to say this, full disclosure, I have been somewhat fascinated.
You have been a child before?
Yeah.
We're blowing this case wide open.
Yeah. I've been fascinated with UFOs and extraterrestrials since I was very young. Probably like the earliest memory I have of being sort of like interested in them was 3 or 4. And like I a few years after that, I visited Roswell as like a family trip just for fun. So
That's amazing, by the way. I really wish I had taken a family trip to Roswell.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
But and I know all this stuff is probably colored by my upbringing, because I mean, I grew up on the Twilight Zone, and
Me too.
and the X-Files and, all that stuff. The first memory I have about like being sort of like this is what I would describe as high strangeness. And I know now that this was something going on in my mind, like in my head. But at the time, as a little kid, I was like convinced that I was having issues sleeping at night, and I would get woken up, or I would wake up. I should put it that way. And
my heart started pounding. Like you almost sent shivers down my spine when you said that.
I would wake up and think that there was something looking in my window.
Well, what?
Yeah.
Like
as a little kid.
What did you think it was?
Well,
did you have any clear idea?
The first thing I thought it was...
Were you like thinking you were catching glimpses of it?
I just remember like through the blinds, and I think it was a dream or something I made up.
Yeah, but no, like that's one of the common threads. Everybody has these trances or these like dreamlike states, and
yeah,
I mean, I guess sleep paralysis is a thing, but
I thought it was chupacabra.
Well, you're a kid. I don't blame you.
Which is a famous cryptid, and I knew a little bit about that.
It obviously wasn't chupacabra.
Obviously was not chupacabra. I'm not a goat.
Yeah. Yet.
But that was the first like thing that I don't know. I remember being like really freaked out, and this would happen like night after night to the point that like
what were you saying it looked like?
Chupacabra.
Oh, okay. So it just looked like a chupacabra.
Yeah, whatever chupacabra looks like. I mean, in my mind, it looked like it had like red glowing eyes and sort of like reptilian skin or something.
Was it like, I'm imagining like Gollum from Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
Okay.
But then that kind of subsided, and what happened after that, and again, I was very young. This is like between 3 and 4 or 3 and 5, something like that. That there was one winter that an owl roosted in our chimney, and at night you could hear the owl hooting in our chimney.
That's weird because of the strange relationship that owls have with all of these stories too, right?
Yeah,
like
there's
one of the
some
common threads we're going to talk about is how the government explanation for every single one of these things is owls or birds,
big birds
in general.
Yeah.
We'll get into that, but
this
is a literal owl.
Yeah,
and it's just so interesting because it's like part of the formula is involved, but it's like inverted or something.
So this part of my like not being able to sleep, waking up, suddenly and being afraid. And again, it wasn't really ever like sleep paralysis or anything like that. But I would wake up and be like immediately afraid, like I had just like come out of a nightmare or something. And then this time, during that period, the owl was roosting in the chimney. Like, I don't remember if I was having a nightmare before, or if I had some sort of weird like state where I like kind of woke up and was still in this like weird fantasy world in my head. But I ran out of the room. My brother's room was across the hall, and I laid down on my back, like screaming and crying, kicking on his door as hard as I could. And I had this image in my head of the owl flying down the chimney and grabbing me by my feet and dragging me out of the house. So, I mean, little kid brain.
Well, Skylar, guess what?
Kind of traumatic.
We have tracked down that owl, and we've brought him here today to talk to you about it.
Let's not do that. Okay.
He must be late. I'll check in on that later. I don't know where the owl is. So
that doesn't make me feel better, Alex.
I don't know where the owl is. Yeah, I can understand why. Don't worry.
So yeah,
I won't let anything bad happen to my special boy.
these things are not necessarily related to UFOs or aliens, but I mean, chupacabra is kind of.
You've been having strange experiences that you can't explain since you were born.
Yeah,
I get
I
it,
can
you
explain
lucky
those, though.
bastard.
I can explain those though.
Yeah.
Because I think those were night terrors and little kid stuff, and X-Files was always playing on Friday nights, and I didn't want to go to bed, so I'd stay up and deprive myself of sleep, and then these things would happen.
So, years after the murder owl,
yeah.
what would you say your first encounter with like a UFO was?
Okay, so this is interesting. And this is one of those things where, like, I have no explanation. Like, I don't think I saw an alien or a spacecraft
Chupacabra?
or anything like that. Well, I definitely don't think the owl came down the chimney and tried to drag me out the door or whatever. But
Maybe it ate the alien.
maybe it did. God, that would be sweet. I do want to meet that
Fed
owl
it
if
to
that's
its
the
baby
case.
owls. Yeah, maybe the owl was a guardian spirit, actually.
I like that.
Maybe that's the government. Like the government comes in afterwards, and all they see is the owls because the owls have chased the entity out.
Yeah.
I told you we're gonna get to the bottom of this.
So this one I will stand by. And again, I was a kid. I was about 13 or 14.
You don't have to say you'll stand by it. I
Well,
believe you.
I'm going to
and
stand by it up until the point that I think I could have imagined something. There are some of these stories that I'm going to tell you that I know for a fact I could not have
We are
imagined.
not concerned with. Listen, if anybody's listening to this who is only interested in is it true or not true, or dude, that was just a blah blah blah, like get the fuck out, like.
But that's
Like
me.
we're engaging in wild speculation on purpose because it's fun and interesting.
yeah.
So that's why we're here.
Thank you for
So
reminding me.
Skylar, don't like defend the weird things that have happened to you. Like don't feel like you have to defend your sanity, okay? You're fine. You're just talking about weird shit that happened in your life. That's all. Like I don't want you to apologize for like having had these experiences, okay?
Okay, so
I love you.
I love you too. I'm 13 or 14. I'm at Bull Creek, which is down towards Busick, on the way to Branson.
It's towards the south of headquarters.
Yeah, and it's way out there. It's not super out there, but it's extremely rural. And at this time, which was like the early 2000s, it would have been much more like wilderness than it is now. But we'd have this get together with our family friends, the Balloos, every year for Connie Balloo's birthday. And so we'd go out and we'd all camp on this creek bed. And it was basically like a free for all for everybody because the parents didn't have to worry about watching the kids because we're all here,
And you said you were about 13 at this time, is that correct?
13 or 14, yeah. I think it was 14. Cuz it was right before I had started to learn to play guitar, and it was right before I went to high school. And it was the last time I really like went out there and stayed the night and did the whole kid thing.
Gotcha.
But
You had a lot of weird stuff happen to you when you were that age. We have some Skylar had some cult experiences, and we talked about that recently, and that's going to be coming up here pretty soon too. But anyway, I'm just like realizing how many strange things have happened to you. I was pretty fortunate or unfortunate, depending on your point of view.
So yeah, it's like a free for all. The parents all get to like hang out and get drunk on the gravel bar and do their thing, and then the kids all kind of play around in the creek
And got drunk in their secret bar.
And I was old enough at this point that my parents weren't really worried about me. I'd already kind of like been a little more independent than some of my friends that were hanging out there as well.
You were also their second child, and your older brother is what, like 8 or 10 years older than you?
9, yeah.
So, I mean, I think that just happens with subsequent children. Like the parents just like they're allowed to gain independence sooner, you know?
Yeah. So I decided I was hanging out with a couple of girls.
Ooh la la.
And another guy. I actually had a crush on one of them, but
The guy or one of the girls?
one of the girls. And we walked away from the camp, like the little bonfire that we had there, that the adults were all hanging out around, and kind of just were hanging out down the creek a ways. And I was always a little bit like I would get up and like leave a group of friends and just go off on my own and walk around.
Yeah,
Get lost in my
I've been
thoughts.
one of those guys too, yeah.
And so I decided to do this, and I wandered down the creek bed, and my thought was like, I want to get as far away from like the sounds, like the people hanging out and the fire, so I can't see the light from the fire. I can't hear anyone talking. And I just kind of wandered off. And I walked.
Was it that were you feeling drawn away from them, or were you just wanting to, like, you were just trying to seek like a certain level of solitude? Or
It was that. It was more just like, I wonder what this space.
you heard the siren sound of silence?
I wonder what this space here on the creek out here in the woods would feel like if I was just here alone and there was no,
Yeah, I can dig it.
around.
I'd probably be interested to have that experience as well.
So I walked a ways away. I don't know how long or far I walked, but I walked far enough that I couldn't hear anyone's voices anymore. All I could hear was the creek and the bugs.
Do you have a specific memory of when the sounds and lights faded, or was it just something you were aware of at some point?
Well, I was doing it deliberately.
Yeah.
And so there was like a specific moment in time, I guess you could say, that like,
Okay.
I was like, okay, I've gone far enough.
Oh, okay, but then you didn't keep going?
No, I stopped there.
Other question. Can we get like an idea? How much sun is there right now?
Well, this is night.
This is night. Okay, gotcha.
And it's not super late, but
Is the sun in the process of going down, or has it already gone down fully?
it's already gone down for like an hour or two
Oh, I
at
see.
this point.
Okay,
And I think the
This is
moon-
summer, yeah?
Yeah. It's
So
summer.
we're talking like 10, 11 p.m.
Yeah, and the moon, I think, is just coming up over the horizon.
Okay. All right. Just okay, so I just wanted to get caught up and make sure we're all on the same page. So what happens next?
So I believe I'm on the north side of the creek, and I'm looking towards the south. And I'm in the woods on this side, and on the other side, and this is honestly one of the things that stopped me too, was that I noticed that like there's woods.
Well, real quick, were the other campers to your north or to your south?
They were to, what would that be?
Were they away from the creek or
They're
towards
to
the
my
creek?
east.
Oh, okay. So you've walked along the creek.
Yeah, I
the
walked
creek
along.
runs east and west.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay.
So I noticed once I got far enough away that I couldn't hear anybody or see the firelight or anything, that so it's all woods down towards the east on both sides of the creek. And then where I had gotten to, there's woods on the side that I'm on, and on the other side of the creek, like you can see the line of trees, and then beyond that there's a big open
Like a
pasture.
clearing
Yeah,
or
it's
a
like a-
meadow.
It's a pasture.
Okay.
So I'm standing, or I like sit down. I'm standing there looking at it, and I was like, this is a good place to stop. So I sit down, and I'm just like kind of looking around and listening to things. And like I said, the moon's just creeping up over the horizon. And I look across towards that pasture, and something like in my peripheral vision draws my eyes upwards. And I see what I described at the time and still do, like a basketball-sized orange orb.
Holy shit.
like float. Like
How far away was it from you?
I mean, the creek is probably like 20 feet across. And then there's a little hill on the other side, like a gravel bank and a hill.
Like 20 feet, 50 feet?
I mean, the trees, I would guess, are probably like 3 or 4 stories tall. And they're probably 40 or 50 feet across, like away
I mean,
from
I'm
me.
not looking for a scientific number, just like if you had to put a number on it, like right now, how far away is it from you? Okay, it doesn't
Like
matter.
150
Okay,
feet.
perfect. Got it.
when I saw it at first.
Okay, and then what is it doing?
It's-
Just sitting there? Or?
No, it's so like if you're sitting where I am, you look up, the trees are behind you, you can see like the sky, right? I'm talking with my hands, and you can see the sky
Doesn't
between.
matter. That's
between
why
the tree
I'm
line.
like forcing you to describe all of this with your words, because yeah.
Right, and then on the other side of the creek, I could see the trees going up, and when it caught my eye, it was halfway across the creek where the trees aren't, and it's just silently floating, and it floats.
But it's going in a definite direction.
Yeah, it's going
and
towards.
is it going very fast?
No, not very fast.
Okay. Is it emitting any sounds, any smells?
No sounds, no smells.
Okay.
But it is. I noticed that it's glowing, or it appears to be glowing, and it's like I said, like it's sort of a burnt orange kind of color,
Like a small sun or something?
yeah, like a small sun. But then it reaches the tree line on the other side, and you would think that it would illuminate the trees. Like it doesn't illuminate
no.
the trees. It's sort of just.
Whoa. So it's not exactly like a light source then.
It's not a light source. I thought it would be. But it just kind of like, it just barely skirts the treetops, and I would think that it would there would be
Yeah,
shadows
so
cast and
it
things.
wasn't emitting light though.
No.
Okay.
And then
Alright.
I watched it.
Did you notice any influence on the environment around it at all?
No, honestly, I don't like. I remember thinking as I was walking back, I didn't notice it. No, I didn't notice any.
Okay. So it drifts off behind the trees, and what? Do you follow it?
No, I just sat there and watched it as it went out across the pasture.
Are you? What are you feeling? Are you terrified as it's floating? Okay.
Honestly, that's one of the strangest things about looking back on it, is that I wasn't afraid at all. In fact, I kind of just accepted that this is a thing that I'm seeing.
Maybe like like almost everyone who has experiences with these things, they describe like a certain level of passivity, or some of them describe it like trances. But I mean, it just sounds like. I mean, maybe it was like emitting some kind of calming effect, because even in the woods, like there's a presence in the woods. It's gonna disturb some shit because there are
Well, that's the other
insects
thing.
and
The insects
birds
didn't
and-
stop
yeah.
making noise, like,
Okay. So that sounds like it scales up to humans. It drifts by, and its influence on you is just like it's a part of what's going on.
I was just kind of like, huh.
Are you realizing at the time how strange it is, or did you only realize that it was strange later?
I realized it was strange after I could no longer see it on the other side of the pasture.
So it drifts off to the other side of the pasture, and then you realize it's strange, and now are you afraid?
Yeah, well, I wasn't afraid. Maybe I was a little afraid.
Just wondering if like its influence wore off, if it got a ways away,
I will say this. I got up and ran back to my little group of friends that was hanging out and was like, "Did you guys see that?"
And so you ran back to the east, and this orb has gone to the south. Am I correct?
Yeah.
So, okay. All right.
Yeah, so I ran back to my group of friends and I was like, "Did you guys see that?" Because in my mind, I was like, there's no way that, like, I was far enough away, but I was like, there's no way, like, if this thing is going around that nobody else saw it. And they were like, what are you talking about? Of course.
Yeah. Well, I
So-
mean, if they're all engaged in their stuff, even if that thing drifted by, it sounds like it has like a calming presence on people. I mean, I'm just making that up, but it seems reasonable.
The other thing I got to say about it is people sometimes talk about how they feel like these things are intelligently driven. I did not get that sense with this particular thing. Like, I got the sense that it was just, again, like a natural part of the environment until I realized, like, holy shit, I just saw this thing that defies explanation. But it could have been one of the crawdads that I ate earlier, I guess.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Too bad there wasn't an owl to save you.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it sounds like it may have just been influencing you to feel that way. It's actually not an uncommon trope in these kinds of incidents, you know? It comes up a lot, so it wouldn't surprise me. That's why I immediately jumped to thinking that. But who knows?
So, yeah.
The intelligence thing is interesting because it's like it might have some other kind of intelligence that we wouldn't recognize as intelligence. It's definitely opens up. One of the reasons I love these stories is because they never have answers. You know, all they ever do is raise questions. Some of them are quite thought-provoking, make you think about deeper issues of the human psyche or philosophy or that sort of thing. Again, just like myths, I'm really big on that. I don't think it takes anything away from these things to say that they're myths or some kind of psychic phenomena, or that high strangeness is just a phenomena that we don't understand, you know. But so I know you're like building up because I've heard some of your UFO stories. What's the next one that happened to you? Give us something that gets a little crazier, a little harder to explain.
I will. I want to touch one thing.
Sure.
The orange orb.
Is there a name for that?
I don't know, but it's very common.
Really?
Yes.
I was going to ask you about that. I'm glad you brought that up.
Are you familiar with the Marfa lights
No, I'm not.
in Marfa, Texas? Or the
Wait, yes, I am. And there's one by Joplin. Am I
the
wrong?
Hornet spook light?
Yeah.
Similar kinds of things, and that is one that I've talked to people that I totally like respect that have said they have seen something along those lines, and that's usually why that's the first one I talk about if I'm going to talk to somebody about this stuff, because there are lots of people I think that have seen things like that for whatever reason. But
Yeah, and by the way, I also know one of the other reasons I don't think that you're crazy is because you are perfectly willing to buy into other explanations that are just like, you know, like there was a natural gas vent under your feet and you just hallucinated it for a few seconds. Like, I know that if you had some evidence that was true, you would prefer that to have been what happened.
yes, 100%.
Because we've talked about it before, and you were like so eager to buy into any explanation that I could possibly offer up to you that means it's not UFOs. And you're also at the same time a person who wants to have like seen UFOs, and it's just weird. It's a weird combination of things, you know? Like, I know you would love to talk to aliens, but you like seem more disturbed by the experiences you've had than like it's not what you wanted from it.
I honestly would rather have just had it be straightforward, but also, you know, yeah, I would rather have not. I honestly, at this point, like, would rather have not had the experiences.
Yeah.
Not that I'm like
Which
that I
is
was
so
afraid
sad.
or upset, like, but it's just not.
I can understand why it would be traumatic to have something happen to you and then you don't have a way to explain it, and it's forever. I mean, for me, I would think it would gnaw at me, and it would make me uncomfortable I wouldn't be comfortable talking about it to other people. I don't know. I can kind of see where you're coming from. I just want to talk to them, you know? I want to, like, ask them what's going on.
It would be nice if it were that easy.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we need to look to the owls.
Look to the owls.
Hoot, hoot.
Okay, so yeah, you want to hear the next one?
Mm-hmm.
This one I feel like has more. It has. There's a lot here. Like there are a lot of things that this could have been. Like,
I told you not to apologize for the experiences you've had.
okay, I'm not. I'm just saying that the difference in this is that this was a shared experience with multiple other people,
Ooh, okay.
and also
I can dig it.
I feel like that makes it almost easier to explain in a way. So anyway,
That's so interesting, though, that you have more comfort when you're thinking about this one because it was a shared experience. It makes sense to me. It's just I feel like there's a lot here that we can get into sociologically that I wish more people took this kind of stuff seriously so we could have actual more scientific research on this kind of thing.
so this is when I was a little older, and also I want to point out that this is at a time in my life where I had fundamentally rejected the religion that I was brought up in.
You guys are going to hear more about that in the cults episode.
And had also really begun to sort of like kind of rework my thought processes in order to be a bit more skeptical of things, and still utterly fascinated by this kind of stuff, but definitely oops. Definitely was a bit more steely minded at this time. I was playing in a band, and can I plug the band? I can plug the band, right?
Yeah, you can always plug the band.
All right. This was the Tall, Dark, and Handsomes. And I was in this band with my best friend at the time and a couple of other people
There are best friends all over this show, which I've called the best friends.
that I was a couple other people that I was close to. This I think this was winter when this happened, because it was already it was twilight for sure, if not already dark, and our practices usually started at like 6 or 7. So we went and picked up our bass player, and the front man, I was the guitar player, the front man was driving. We went and picked up our bass player, and we're driving back to the practice space, which is out towards it's like off of East Chestnut Expressway. I want to say Evergreen maybe is where it was at. So east of town, and there was some like development stuff going on, like they're building new segments of this residential area.
So to kind of give like a description of the area you're talking about, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you've gone outside of the city, which is where you spend most of your time, and it's an area of town where it's not like you're not in the hills,
but there's some like wooded areas and some fields and things, but it's sparser. There are houses around and everything, but everybody's got a bit more land and things are sparse.
Yeah. And as we're getting out towards the house that we're practicing in, all three of us noticed that there are these just like I don't know if I've ever seen spotlights this bright, but like
Spotlights? Can you elaborate on that?
like 3 bright white spotlights. They weren't, it wasn't like they weren't like beaming at the ground really, but they were very
Oh, they were coming from the sky. Because sometimes businesses in town will have like these spotlights, that shoot from the ground to the sky as advertising or whatever.
right.
You're not talking about that.
No.
These are coming from the sky.
Yeah, we could see the source of the lights like in the sky. And all of us were like
Is it clear skies or cloudy?
clear skies.
Okay.
All of us were kind of like holy shit, that's like really fucking bright. Like it seemed abnormal.
Are you thinking at this time that it's like a helicopter or something? And
That's what we first thought. Like we first thought like, oh, that must be like a helicopter or something, But it seemed from where we were, from our vantage point, and we were in motion at this time, that it was much bigger than a helicopter. Like, and also, we thought like, you've seen like a jet liner fly over. This was not like this. This was like, these weren't lights to like indicate where this thing was in
could
the
you
sky.
gauge the distance of it at all?
So when we first noticed it, I'd say we were a mile away.
So it sounds like it's high up but getting closer. Is that?
Well, we were getting closer to it.
I see. But it wasn't going closer to you though. You were getting closer to it at the rate that you were driving.
Right. And that's important
Okay.
for what happens next.
Right.
So we pull onto the side road, the access road that is in this little neighborhood, and we were all like talking about it, like what could this be? And one of us,
I'm so sorry. One more question. Was it aiming search like spotlights at you?
no, it was just it. Like the way it looked to me was that there were 3 super bright white lights. It didn't look like they were like pointed at anything in particular, but
They weren't blinking.
they were not blinking. This is where my memory gets foggy on it a bit, because I feel like I remember there being blinking lights of some type, but the bright white spotlights definitely were not blinking. So we pull onto the access road, and we were just planning on going straight to practice. And one of us said something that's like, oh, maybe it's like a construction site. It's one of those big, like,
Oh, that actually makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
towers with those bright white lights, for whatever development is happening. And at this point, I think I pressed it and was like, well, it's just, the road that we're turning on is just a block north. Like, it's the next road down. How about we just like go take the back way? Because there's a road that goes through on that road.
So I mean, you guys were like concerned about this. Like, I mean, you were
Curious.
having a discussion about it, and I mean, it sounds like you're not wanting to take the straight ahead way because you don't want to have a confrontation with this thing.
No, I was saying that I wanted us to go see what it was before we go to practice.
I see. Okay.
Because I was curious, and we all were curious, because, I mean, all of us agreed that this was not... It seemed strange.
So it was easy to convince them to do that?
Fairly. I mean, know...
So
We're
at least one other person is like concerned about
Yeah.
what that would mean.
Well, yeah, and I also think that the driver was somewhat indulging me, just because, we were hanging out. It wasn't like imperative that we be at the place at the certain time or anything.
How seriously was everyone else taking it?
Well, not terribly seriously, and I wasn't taking it terribly seriously. Again, it was more
You
curiosity.
guys are like late teenage years at this point, right?
I think I think it was like 18, 19, 20.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, at that age, I could, of course, yeah. I mean, I would never not go see what it was, but especially at that age.
So we turned down the road that we think is going to take us towards this thing in the sky.
It hasn't moved still. Can you see it?
It hasn't moved. I can see it. Yeah, we can see it. Yeah. And as we turn down this road, we all realize kind of simultaneously that this thing is like directly above the road that we're on, in front of us, and we're close enough
That's
to
so
it.
creepy. It can't be a construction thing if that's the case.
Right. And we're close enough to it that this is when the other two people started to get a little like, oh shit, kind of thing going on. You know what I mean?
The look in your eyes right now is like you're like having like a horrifying experience like going over this, by the way.
Yeah.
I can understand why.
I wasn't really scared or anything, but I was excited.
No, yeah, well, yeah.
You
yeah,
know?
of course, because this is very bizarre.
And so
If it was like a tower, you would be able to see some, you know, the piece that, like the tower part, the
Right.
tower section of the tower.
So at this point, we're probably like a couple football fields down the road towards this thing, and
Can you get a gauge on the size at all? Bigger than a helicopter,
bigger than a helicopter,
but there's no propeller.
and no sound.
Okay, all right.
And so at this point, the driver was like, we're not going further. Like we're turning around, we're going back to practice. And I was like, no, let's just go and like see, like, let's see or whatever. And he pulls the van over to the side of the road, and we're all kind of just staring at it. And in this moment, I was like, fuck it, and jumped out of the van and started like
You are a hero.
running down the road toward it. And once I got out of the van and we were not moving, I could kind of give you a better idea of like the scale of it and how far I was from it. I mean, it would have been like a quarter of a mile down the road towards it to get directly underneath it. And as I think I got probably like not even, I mean, probably like 30 yards, running, kind of jogging, I guess, towards it. And it started moving, and just like completely silently moved from directly in front of me towards my left, and just like it started slowly and then picked up pace, and then was like gone shortly thereafter. And that's what I was mentioning earlier. Like my memories of like exactly what was going on with it are kind of fuzzy, because the lights were so bright, but I swear that there were like red and blue like blinking lights on it. But they weren't like, it was like they were like they were like running along the side of it. It wasn't like stationary blinking lights. It was like they were like moving along the side, you know, from left to right. And it was gone. And at this point,
That's so weird.
the other two guys didn't get out of the van, and they just sat there and watched it like go. And then I walked back to the van. We drove to practice, all of us completely dead silent.
That's a lot to
We got to practice.
take in.
We got to practice, unloaded our gear, and I didn't even like get my stuff loaded all the way into the garage where we were practicing. I like put my amp down. outside of the garage and sat down, and our drummer at the time was like, what the fuck is up with you guys? And like, I wasn't saying anything. And then
He hadn't been there, right?
yeah, he had not been there. And then our bass player didn't, I don't think, really said anything other than that we saw something strange. And then my friend, the driver, explained, and then immediately jumped in that like maybe it was like a military aircraft or something, or you know what I mean? Like,
I mean, what else?
he described it to our drummer as a blimp.
That's kind of what I had in my head. It's interesting, but I mean, I don't think it could do what that object did.
Well, also, why would there be a fucking blimp? I mean,
I don't
unless
think it
somebody
was a
just a dirigible fanatic decided to fly one over.
You know? All the best villains have blimps. We need to get ourselves a blimp.
Maybe it was Owlman, the supervillain. Is that a supervillain? I don't know.
I'm not sure. But that's a lot to take in. You have more UFO stories, yeah?
I do.
Okay.
I want to say before we move on that one didn't sit with me very well at the time, and retelling it now, it still doesn't sit with me terribly well.
Also, it couldn't have been a drone because this would have been like 2007.
2007, 2008, yeah. Well, I guess 2008, 2009 is what it really would have been, yeah. I have to pee.
Me too. I was going to say that we're going to cut here, and we'll have more UFO encounters from Skylar Smith in a few minutes. Well, I guess a few minutes for us. It could be any amount of time for you people, assuming there are people.
Missing time? All about Betty and Barney. I've been told that before.
I think it's a good quality to have, personally. But anyway, so we last left off at the exciting conclusion of the UFO before band practice.
Yes.
And
first shared experience.
Okay. I like how you were telling these stories in escalating steps. It's also interesting that they're kind of going in chronological order. It's almost like they chose you from the beginning.
Well, this next one is going to be a little bit of a letdown if you were expecting it to be more than that.
You're not going to let me down, buddy.
It's really short, too. And this is just... I wish that there had been more to it, and I did spend some time trying to see that there would be more to it by pursuing the thing that I saw in a vehicle, but I was unable to relocate it after the initial experience, so it's old.
Okay. I thought Skylar had left something over on a different table. Sorry for interrupting you, Skylar.
That's okay.
I don't think, like, it's interesting that you would describe this as a letdown. It's all interesting to me, so. What happened?
Okay, so I used to deliver pizzas overnight. I would work 5 p.m. till almost 5 a.m. And the cool thing about driving at night is you see all sorts of crazy things, especially if you live in a metropolitan area. This, however, another thing that this has in common with the other two is that this was in a more rural area that this happened. So I was on a delivery, and I want to say this was about 11 o'clock at night, and I think at this time I was 27 or 28, so much older, much, I think, more in my head, you know, kind of had defined my personality and my beliefs at this point fairly solid.
You were a full 3-dimensional person, and yeah, you had a strong sense of identity and what you wanted, and yeah, all that shit.
So I got a delivery, and the delivery area that I was in, it was on the north side of Springfield. The furthest we would go out was like 5 or 6 miles outside of the store. So this is towards like way off of East Division, and I can't remember. I think it's called Wild Horse is the residential area out there. And at this time, it was still partially being built. So there's like old farm properties around this area, and then like, you know, a gated community right there too. So the house that I was going to wasn't actually on the map, and I tended to not use my GPS on my phone at the time. I would just look at the big map in the store and be like, okay, that's where I'm going, and kind of drive out there and hope I saw the number on the house. So I went out there, but I couldn't find the house. So I had to pull over and stop and look it up on my the maps on my phone. And while I was doing that, I had like stepped out of the car because I think I walked up to a house that was the wrong house. And this was at the end of like a dead end road, and there were a couple of houses that were complete that people were living in, and then beyond that there were houses under construction. And so I'd stepped out because I was checking a house number to see if that was the right house before I started put it in my phone to look it up. And it was a particularly clear night, and out here there's not a whole lot of light pollution. There's a little bit, but I looked, like, for whatever reason, I looked directly above me up at the stars, which I tend to do, I guess. I mean, everybody probably does. You know, you're out in a place and it's like, wow, look at the stars. So I looked up and I saw a bright white light, and this was very far away. It seemed like I at first thought it was a satellite. You know, you've seen a satellite, right?
Yeah. The only times I've ever, like, there were a couple of times when I thought I saw a UFO, and then I realized it was a satellite because they move so strangely compared to like aircraft, you know.
So I looked up and I saw this like pinpoint of light, assumed it was a satellite, and just kind of was standing there for a second. And as I was watching the thing cross the sky, it stopped and took like a 90-degree turn.
That's not a fucking satellite.
And went back in the opposite direction.
Nope, not a satellite.
And so
Definitely not a satellite.
at this point I realized I was at the right house. And so I ran. I ran. I know that sounds funny. I ran up to the door because I was like, my concern was not like, am I at the right house? Am I going to deliver this pizza? My concern was, what the fuck was that? And so I ran up to the door, did the transaction.
Maybe it was a blimp, dude. No, I'm sorry. I like him. I understand what he was like going through. I don't want to make fun of him,
but ran back to
definitely not a satellite.
ran back to, like, ran to the door, did the transaction, ran back to the car, and I could still see it, but it was like further away. I mean, I couldn't tell how far it was. Like, I thought it, like, again, like, you see a satellite, that's like a huge distance. But then I realized once I saw it like turn, I was like, no, that's closer than I thought it was. And so when I got back to the car, I could still see it, and I could see it moving towards like areas where I knew there were roads. and it was moving towards, like, there's a back way back to the store that takes you, like, on all these, like, farm roads.
Yeah.
It takes you longer to get back there. But I hopped in the car and I whipped it around and drove as fast as I could towards, like, the main farm road that cuts through. And I could still see it when I got on this farm road headed up north. And at some point,
So you are chasing this thing at this point.
yeah, because I wanted to know.
Could you make out any details at all? Any shape? Or this also was not making sound, I assume?
No, and it wasn't. I don't want, like, it wasn't. It wasn't as far away as a satellite, but like I said, when I watched it turn like that, I could tell it was closer.
It sounds like it was just hard to tell, though. That actually seems like kind of a common thing in general with these. Like, it's hard for you to make out specific details beyond very broad. Was it this one was it emitting any light that you could see? Did it have any spotlights or anything?
No, it was just. It looked like a star.
So it was emitting light of some kind, but it wasn't like blinking or anything.
No.
Okay.
And then, so I'm headed up the farm road, and instead of turning towards back to the store, because that's where I lost sight of it, and I just kind of took a guess when I hit the T, instead of taking the left at the end of this farm road, the road that would have taken me back to the store, or back to Kearney Street, I took a right, and I was just like, I'm just going to drive out as far as I can and then stop and see if I can see it still. And of course, I lost sight of it at that point, so yeah.
Did you see what direction it was going towards?
So when I initially saw it, it was moving west to east in a straight line.
It's interesting. I wonder why it decided to change direction.
And then it took a 90-degree turn towards the north, or, well, it was more than a 90-degree turn, I guess. It was more like 45-degree towards the northwest. And then, and also another thing that happened when it did that, it's moving in a straight line from east to west, and then takes this turn like 45 degrees back to the northwest, and it kind of like does a little S, you know, like a snaking pattern. Yeah. And details beyond that, I can't really say. I mean, it looked like a star. I didn't hear any sound. It is kind of strange that I'm on the clock and I was like, I'm going to go chase this thing down.
I don't think that's strange. I think a lot of people would do that. So I can understand why you say it's disappointing, but I really don't think it's, I don't think it's disappointing. I think you've exhibited a real arc, though, when it comes to these things. You went from when you were a child running from the whole situation, trying to kick your brother's door down for protection, to just standing still, to arguing with your friends that you should go chase it, to actually chasing it. Like, this is like a hero's journey you've been on with these.
Thanks. I don't know if I'd call it a
Strange
hero's
phenomena.
journey.
Yeah, I know, but,
Yeah.
the myth part of it is what's interesting to me. I mean, like, strange stuff is definitely happening. You so rich, you got coins falling out of your pocket?
Yeah.
I like a man who has coins. It's such a weird thing to have in this day and age with cards, you know?
Well, I get tipped in change all the time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Kind of weird, though. So, you got more...
I have one more, and I'm hesitant to tell it
Okay.
because it's not entirely my experience.
I was a passenger.
I think you're allowed to tell it.
Okay. My friend probably will never tell this story.
Well, we'll just, we'll respect the privacy and choice of your friend. Maybe you should just tell it as if it happened to you. I mean, that's like not...
Well, but
We're being upfront about it.
I can't because
Okay.
things did happen to me.
Well, I can respect that. So, yeah. So, do you think your friend would be bothered if you told it?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Then I think you can tell it. And if needed, we can just edit this out later, It's not a big deal.
Okay. So this is the most recent, and I'm going to refer to this as a high strangeness experience because I did not actually bear witness to anything directly.
Maybe we should just briefly explain what high strangeness is, because it's a term we've mentioned a few times.
Go for it.
I was going to ask if you would go for it.
Well, we may have different ideas of it, but
Okay, so should we just Google it so we all have a shared definition?
yeah, that would be
Okay.
good.
For me, it is like a thing that everybody does have a different definition for, but it's because it's more like a threshold, So the Wiktionary says it's a quality of being peculiar, bizarre, utterly absurd. For me, it always had a more like paranormal or supernatural or hyper real, something that is beyond the real, that kind of connotation to it as well. But what is your personal...
Well, that's what I was kind of getting at, which when I said I don't know if we have the same definition, but we do.
Yeah.
It involves things that are extraordinary.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So this is more of a high strangeness kind of story for you, which
From-
all of these, by the way, qualify for my definition of it. That is the very element that I am fascinated by. But anyway.
Yeah, from my perspective, the way I would describe it, from what I experienced revolving around this, is a high strangeness kind of thing. So this happened about 2 years ago.
So you're 30 or 29.
29.
Okay.
And I'm with a friend. It happened during the summer, and that's important because it was at a time when the University of Missouri, or MSU, excuse me, was not in session. My house, which is located a block from Phelps Grove Park, which is 2 or 3 blocks away from MSU, me and my friend got home after I think we had gone and had dinner, and we were bringing some stuff in. I ended up being in the house first, and my friend had forgotten something in the car, which was parked in the driveway. And my friend went back out to the car. I'm, standing inside, like organizing. I think we had groceries or something, or some food that we needed to put away. And my friend went back out to the car to grab whatever we had forgotten, and came back inside, or was coming back inside, and saw in their peripheral vision a series of 4 or 5 bright white spotlights.
So I know what you're thinking, because I thought the same thing, which was, could these have been lights from one of the stadiums at the college?
Yeah.
Could they have been?
They could have been.
had it not been for the fact that, one, you can see the lights at the stadium if you're standing in my front yard, but you can't see the lights. You can only see the glow of the lights if they're on.
So the position is all wrong.
Yeah. Which at the time, the lights weren't on, which we went and investigated that because that was my first thought. Well, it was actually my second thought. So my friend saw in their peripheral vision these like 4 or 5 bright white spotlights, and
Almost like the Phoenix lights, which we'll get to eventually, but it's kind of like, is that kind of spacing where it's all even?
yeah. In a row,
And they're not moving.
Not moving, and they're directly above. So my friend is facing to the north. Just had put a foot on the steps in front of my house and can see over the awning of my house what looks to be, as it was described to me, you know, a football field or two away and a cup like 100 feet above the ground. So just above the trees in my backyard. And
Which is small and close, by the way, for anyone who's like trying to visualize this.
yeah, and so
So these lights must have been almost directly overhead to have that. This is the position we're talking about, which the stadium lights that would be nearby would be, if you're facing, it's like farther to the right and lower in the atmosphere. This is what he's talking about when he says he can see the glow but not the lights. So to see the actual lights, this is what we're saying, the position is impossible. And you know, a lot of people might not know exactly where you live, but it's like an important, you know, like people would think, well, the college, you know, but no, it's not. That's not what this is. It's something else.
right. and so I'm telling all of that sort of preliminarily because what happened after that is my friend comes inside and is visibly, like physically disturbed and shaken.
Your friend is one of the most relaxed people I know, too. So that seems like it's like definitely, you know, something's gone wrong.
Yeah, and to the point where like I was concerned, I was like, my immediate thought was like, did someone come up to you at the car? Like, you know, like I almost went, like I did actually. I went outside and was like looking around to see what could have happened because my friend wouldn't tell me.
That's
What
interesting
had happened.
because a lot of these things are almost invasive in the same kind of way. Like they get into like some space that you're occupying and you're not comfortable with that thing being there, you know. It's like whatever it is, it's some other kind of presence, you know. It's very
Well, and that's the thing. Like after some coaxing, after I had gone outside and like out to the car, and after some coaxing, eventually my friend told me that, you know, what I just described, and the thing that stuck out to me was that my friend said that they felt like they shouldn't be seeing this, like immediately upon,
like it was an accident.
upon seeing it. Yeah, like should not. It was like something that they should not have seen. And
That's so interesting.
and was momentarily like frozen, you know, and described it in terms of like that this thing that they were witnessing, that they were looking at, was looking back at them.
That's so interesting.
And so after that, after having explained that to me, I went back outside and looked to where it would have been, because at that point I hadn't. and didn't see anything, right?
Like they got their shit together, and like it's weird. It almost feels like a cross section of realities or something, and it definitely doesn't feel like it feels accidental. Like they let the curtain slip a little bit.
Yeah. And so then when I didn't see anything there, I was kind of, like, maybe it was just a trick of light in your eyes or something. And my friend was like,
It could have been a blimp.
could have been a blimp. Could have been a weather balloon.
Sure could have been.
My friend was like, well, here's one of the things that makes me know that. Well, and that's the thing. They were saying that this is one of the things that makes me know that this was not just a trick of light and something that was incidental. Like, after the like immediate freeze and terror that happened, my friend started to come inside and then stepped back and didn't see it again. It was gone instantly. And at the time I was like, well, you just mistook something. But to my friend, that seemed to be more of like I know for a fact that there was this thing here, and when I looked away from it and looked back, it was gone, and there's no way that could have happened.
We always feel so compelled to rationalize these things. It's almost like they're taunting us, or it could even be a piece of our subconscious, I've taken drugs like DMT show you that in a very real way, the reality around you as you experience it is completely optional. It could be something like our brain occasionally throwing us a serious curveball, even in our waking life, to remind us that we're not in control of the reality around us and what we experience. That said, it could be something like that, or it could be actually there are these outsiders, and maybe it could be like that Star Trek movie, that TNG movie where they're the thing they had cloaked kind of fucked up, and or actually there's a TNG episode that's even better, where the thing fucks up and people that aren't supposed to see the research station, and now you have to deal with the consequences of that. Like if she felt that, it could be that. It's interesting though that it would be giving that specific energy off, almost like she caught someone with their pants down, or it's so interesting.
So, what happened after that? After we stood outside for a while talking about it, which was not what my friend wanted to do. My friend wanted to be inside and was still like very physically very disturbed by this. And I pointed out that my neighbor to the east has a row of 5 bright white lights in the front yard that like kind of go along the walkway up to the stairs to the door. And I was like, do you think maybe you looked at those? And then quickly looked up at the sky and saw that? Sort of like a tracer, or I don't know what that's
I understand
actually
what you're
called.
saying, but wouldn't it be interesting if it was even weirder and it was like a mirror, like the whatever the craft is or whatever, it mirrored the lights back, and your friend saw that, and that was the mistake that they made, was not fixing But what did your friend say to the idea that it could be like a tracer?
Absolutely not.
I mean, they wouldn't look white, right? To me, they always look red or I don't know, purple sometimes.
Yeah. My friend was like almost offended that I would suggest that maybe that was it.
Is it? Yeah, it's so. Oh man. Was your friend willing to entertain any explanation whatsoever?
Yes.
Okay, what was the explanation that they felt like was most likely?
Well, the stadium lights initially were the like immediate like, oh, that would make sense. But then we went and looked, and for one, they weren't on, and for two, there's no way we could have seen them from that vantage. And then, I mean, those were the only two real explanations that I could give, but again, I didn't see it, And
Yeah.
I know that the lights on the ground were out of the question, because what my friend said was that they could see the lights on the ground while they were looking at the lights in the sky. Like, because the way it is like, if you're standing where my friend was standing, you could see over the awning, and also well within your like regular vision, not even peripheral, you could see the row of lights. And they're also not terribly bright. Like, they're fairly dim, So I recommended, because my friend was in such a disturbed state about this, and maybe this is good, maybe it's not, I recommended that my friend submit a sighting to MUFON. Because and my friend was not familiar with what MUFON is at all, the Mutual UFO Network.
Explain what MUFON is.
So MUFON is I think it's global now, but it's originally a national organization of UFO researchers, and it's more or less a database of sightings people can submit where something happened, where they saw something, and there's like a list of like criteria that your sighting has to meet to actually be uploaded to the database. And it's basically just a catalog to organize this geographically.
The archive.
It's the archive. Yeah, but it's a database. It's to organize all this stuff chronologically and geographically to see if there are patterns, and there are people who are in.
It's a really good. It's a really good thing to be doing, I think, because it would be very helpful to know if there's some signal in all of this noise. Because there's just a lot going on. I mean, whatever is happening, it's having a very real effect on the people that it happens to. And it would be really good for us to know what exactly is going on here. Because, anyone who says there's nothing going on is just ridiculous, Like, you and I don't give a lot of stock to, like, ghost sightings, for example. One of the reasons for that is because I think many of them are easily explained by things like infrasound. And there could be something similar to that happening with UFO sightings and that kind of thing, but it would be really helpful to know what that is. Because even if it's happening all inside of a person, I just feel like it would be good if we knew that.
It would be. Yes.
So things like MUFON are really good resources.
They need a little bit more oversight, because
probably. But it's just.
But it is a good
these
thing.
are forward steps. These are progress.
So here's where my experience in heavy air quotes begins, the high strangeness part of this. So eventually, like, we stay up and talk about this. We submit the sighting to MUFON and then go to sleep. And I don't remember exactly why, but I ended up sleeping on the opposite side of the bed that I normally sleep on. And I woke up. I want to say I woke up, but it was, I know I was awake, but it almost felt like a trance or a dream again. Like
Passivity.
Yeah, well,
Would you describe it as sleep paralysis?
no.
Okay.
It was more like I woke up and everything was kind of like watery. Like there was like almost like and again, this is why I described it as a dream when I was telling my friend about it, because I definitely was awake and conscious, and
Do you have any memory what time this was?
This would have been like, I mean, the sun wasn't up, so it would have been sometime between
Like 3 or 4 in the morning?
probably. I want to say it was
Well known as the most bizarre hours, by the way.
yeah. It had to have been close to that. If at the earliest, it would have been 2, I think.
This is so interesting. So there may have been some kind of residual effect or something.
Well, here's the thing. I woke up and it wasn't like the normal, like I wake up, because I wake up in pretty much every night to go get a drink of water or eat or some stuff.
It happens when a man reaches a certain age, I think.
But I woke up
Happens to me too.
this time and it was like, yeah, there was like a sense of like calm. Like everything felt very.
That's so weird. This is like the first time I've really thought about this, but the fact that that's like such a consistent part of it.
Yeah.
Like the calm, that's because you would think you would be in like a state of fight or flight if you were faced with a lot of these things. But for a lot of the people that have experienced it, they all, almost to a man or woman, describes a sense of calm and passivity.
Yeah. And like there was like a tactile, like, nature in my mind, at least, to the very like air in the room. Like I don't know how to describe it other than being under in like a,
Like pressure?
no, like in like a, like the air was like fluid. It wasn't, it was like,
That's why you described it as wet or dripping.
yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, this almost sounds like you got sucked into whatever they were. What if it was like a car wreck, or like they had an accident or something and they had to keep their camouflage up? It sounds like one of these. There are stories where like dimensions bleed over or whatever. That's how the people describe them. This almost sounds more like one of those kinds of situations. Like there's like a Venn diagram, and you were like in the overlap section.
Overlap section?
Yeah, we're just going to ignore that. You were like in the overlap section due to some kind of like strange, like something weird happened on the other end, and they fucked up. And now this is like a part of that. Yeah.
So,
Because I don't know, that has a lot in common with other stories that I've heard more like that.
and this is the first time I've ever like felt this way. Like legitimately. And as I'm laying there and kind of this weird atmosphere is like washing over me, I feel extremely compelled to look out the window that's next to my bed. Which my bed is like right up against the window. It's like at bed level.
Can you describe what you mean by compelled a little bit? Like you just had like an urge to do it, or
Yeah, like
was there any specific thing drawing you, like a light or a sound?
No.
Just a feeling.
It was oddly quiet. Honestly, like oddly.
That area where you live, it's never completely quiet.
Sometimes at that time of the morning, but not.
Okay. Like no animals or anything? Because sometimes the birds around here drive me fucking crazy.
Yeah, nothing like that. It was very still. There was like a stillness for sure. And I felt like I needed to look out the window. And as I was like laying in such a way where I was kind of facing the window. And as I was like compelled to like sit up and draw the curtain back to look out the window, I hear a voice in my head that says, "Look away, avert your eyes."
Okay, we have a lot to unpack here. What did the voice sound like? Did it sound like you?
No, well, it sounded like an inner monologue. It wasn't.
But you didn't have control over the inner monologue like you usually do.
It wasn't unfamiliar to me. Like it was as if I was trying to create an inner monologue that sounded like me, but as like a woman, or like
it almost is in line with the calming nature of it. Like it's trying to like. There's a communication that's happening that's trying to be friendly but firm. Almost in the way that, like, again, like an accident, like whenever we have accidents, we'll put like cones down or flashers that are like, don't do this. You better avoid doing this or there will be consequences. And that's almost like this, where it's like calm and authoritative, but, very clear. Don't look out here right now. Don't look at us. If you look at us, there will be trouble. And your friend already got to look at them. And it's going to be a real problem if a second person looks at them.
And so at that time when that was happening, when that popped into my head, I was also still like, it was like I was like incredulous about it. I was like, what? Like I had like my normal, what I would call my inner monologue going on too. Like,
I think it's pretty rare to not have control over your inner monologue or to like rebel against your inner monologue. There might be times where you'll like think of something and then want to unpack it, but it's not very common for a 29-year-old man to have an inner monologue that makes you react with, "What?" Bro, you serious? If my inner monologue, for no reason, just said, "Look away, avert your eyes," there is nothing in this universe that will keep me from looking at that thing.
I didn't.
I know. Which makes me think that it didn't come from within you and it came from outside of you.
I went very quickly back to sleep.
Yeah. That's so interesting because, again, with like the calming and the passivity, there's always a level of control. We will get to the Betty and Barney Hill thing, at some point, but a big part of their story is that that trans-like state and the conforming to the instructions of the entities as they describe them.
Yeah.
Especially the captain, because Barney was like a lot of the time, in that story, they almost have this attitude of like, yeah, we get it. And Betty is like, I'm going to remember you. And they're like, okay, lady, we get it. Just, get back in the car. Okay. And, yeah, in this situation, like, cause we have no idea what's going on at the other end of this thing. Is I guess kind of my point, but it could be something that is just like kind of normal or boring for whatever is happening on the other end. So yeah,
It's fun to think about. Fun to think about the possibilities. It's probably so much stranger, but also so much more mundane than we could ever possibly imagine.
So, to bring this story to a close, nothing happened after that.
You went back to sleep and everything was good.
Woke up, went along with our lives for...
How rested did you feel the next day?
I mean, not very, but I never really do, so...
Okay, so not out of the ordinary.
Yeah, not out of the ordinary. I mean, I do remember feeling like that was weird, and almost being like, hey, let me tell you about this dream I had. You know,
Wonder what would have happened if you had not looked away. Because that was very clear. Like they were like trying to be friendly, but that was like there was a threat couched inside of that. I mean, you realize that, of course. Yeah.
it was very direct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a few weeks go by, and the way that my friend submitted the MUFON sighting did not indicate that there would be any follow-up or correspondence. But I got a phone call from a random number, and just on a whim, like I typically don't answer numbers that I don't recognize. But on a whim, answered this particular phone call. And it was from the regional MUFON director, who was calling us back in regards to the sighting report that we submitted, which in the conversation, I don't remember all the details of it. He just wanted to know more about what had happened. And he told me that the reason that he had called us back was because like they don't normally call back on sightings, but the reason that he called us back was because between a certain, like, I think it was like a 3 or 4 day period, they had 18 something, I think it was 18 sighting reports submitted in this region that this guy for MUFON oversees.
Oh, wow.
That matched a certain number of criteria that our sighting had.
Did they indicate whether or not they were similar?
Yeah.
So, oh wow.
The
Maybe there's like some interdimensional construction going on.
the lights, that was a common thread. The regional area and you know.
But are they all mistakes? You know?
I don't know.
Maybe there's something going wrong and they have that spell or technology or whatever that makes people look away as like an additional safeguard, you know. Oh man, there's so much to think about.
So I guess that's kind of the end of that one. And I like that one again because that was also a shared sort of experience. And
that's something that I'll have to think about, and I might have more to ask you about later, but I do think that's where we're going to close part 2 of this. And I might talk to you more about this later on, Mike. Definitely going to talk to you about it off mic. And then we're going to get into the stories that have happened to other people. I just thought it would be good to let everybody know where we stand in our... We're going to just ignore that. So, do you have anything else to say?
just thanks for letting me tell you all of those stories.
Dude, you got the crazy stories. You talked about cults and now this, and I'm very excited to share that with everybody. I think part 1 of this had some issues with the audio. That was the white noise in the background. Hopefully I'm going to be able to clean that up a little bit before we upload it. If not, I'm very sorry, and I'll never allow it to happen again. Bye, everybody.